All right, we're live again. It is Thursday, 3-year anniversary of the DeAndre Hopkins trade. Not the best trade. I put out a video of the reaction of where I was, what it was like when the Hopkins trade happened. Here we are, 3 years removed. It does seem like it was a long, long time ago. Although once you start talking about it, you can take yourself back to that time, and it just kind of gets a little bit emotional. It is a locker room number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 Central on Sports Radio 610. You can download the Odyssey app and follow along. I want to talk about the strength of this team, and I really think the best thing that Nick Caserio has done in the last 2 seasons. Um, the secondary. The secondary for the Houston Texans right now is a clear strength of this team. And Nick Caserio has done it in multiple ways. But what they did last year was they drafted two guys that should be core pieces. You saw some ups and downs from both of those guys. And they signed someone this year, and they brought in some guys last year. If you look at the secondary right now and you look at the cornerbacks, Derek Stingley, Steven Nelson, Desmond King, Tavier Thomas, those are going to be your top corners. And then you look at the starting safeties, you have Jimmy Ward and Jalen Petrie. How good can this secondary be is my question. I think the secondary right now could end up being, I think DJ Bieneme of ESPN put this out there. It could end up being like one of the 10th best secondaries in the NFL. You also got Desmond King, and Desmond King is a nasty dude. I think this secondary is really, really nasty. And Jalen Petrie as well at safety, along with Jimmy Ward. How good this secondary is going to be, though, is going to be based on what Derek Stingley ends up being. He's always going to be connected to Sauce Gardner because he was the pick before Sauce Gardner. I think Sauce Gardner got a head start on him because he had more in front of him. He had more around him. He had a better system. And he had one of the best rookie years that we've seen from a corner, but he didn't do it himself. His surroundings helped him. And Derek Stingley, his surroundings did not help him. He had a whitey-tighty missionary coach who I think the game had passed by in Lovie Smith. He got hurt, although I think that had they been competing, I don't think they would have shut Stingley down. I think a lot of that was caution. And at times he was inconsistent. Had the big play against Jacksonville in the end zone where he baited Trevor Lawrence into the interception. But Derek Stingley, whether he closes the gap on Sauce Gardner and plays like that or not is gonna depend whether or not this secondary is elite. Because if he's an elite number one corner, then the sky's the limit. Because Steven Nelson as a number two, solid. Desmond King doing what he did last year, especially when Stingley went out, solid. Adds a whole nasty element. Tavier Thomas, when he's healthy in the slot, solid. You got solid depth at cornerback. At safety, you have Jalen Petrie, who last year had 5 interceptions, and it was kind of up and down. They were moving in between free safety. They were moving in between strong safety. And quite frankly, for as much as I like the job that Jonathan Owens did and the guy that Jonathan Owens did, and I'm a big fan of him. Congrats on the baby, by the way, to Jonathan Owens, friend of the show, and Simone Biles. You needed another safety by Jalen Petrie so you can maximize what he does. And they got that with Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward is a veteran. I think 8-9 years from now, when you hear Derek Stingley or you hear Jalen Petrie talk about their careers, they're going to talk about the influence Jimmy Ward had on him. Much like when you hear Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, two of the Eagles leaders, talk, they still mention DeMeco Ryans. And just, what he meant to them when he played with them for a short time early on in their career. That's the impact Jimmy Ward brings. But it's not one of those Rex Burkhead, Justin Britt, uh, Hamu Grugier-Hill. It's not one of those culture types of guys that doesn't really have a lot of substance. It's not that type of that type of vibe. It's a guy who 2 years ago was the 96th ranked player in the NFL network top 100. It's a guy who can play some safety. He can guard in the nickel. It's a guy who is going to add some help on the field, and he's going to add some leadership. So you look at this secondary, you got to feel pretty good. The last 2 years, the secondary and the offensive line were weaknesses, and the overwhelming strength right now of this football team is the secondary. The ceiling is going to depend on what Derek Stingley ends up being. So that's where we're at there. What are the other strengths of this team? You can put in the comments. We'll get to them. If they're topical, we'll read them on the go. If you want to talk about something else, put it in there, and maybe I'll get to it at the end. But what do you think are the other strengths, and what do you think are the other weaknesses? And be sure and like and subscribe to the Locker Room right along with me 10 to 2 Monday through Friday on Sports Radio 610. The other area of strength for the Texans right now might be it's really hard to say that they're strong anywhere else. I think the secondary could potentially be a top 10 unit, but as far as and Steven brings this up, if the Texans get a center and Laramie Tunsil stays, I agree. I think the offensive line could be pretty good, especially with Shaq Mason and the run blocking and the upgrade there. Now, the problem with it is I think if you have, like, if we look at the linebackers, you can have one glaring hole at linebacker and you can kind of make up for it. One guy doesn't completely bring everyone down. Obviously, a weakest link is going to bring you down, but you can overcome it. But when it comes to an offensive line, especially at center, and I think it might even be center more so than anything else. When it comes to an offensive line, like center, you need a center because the center is going to help Kenyon Green. The center is going to help everyone around him. A lot of times the center is going to be the one calling out the mic and stuff like that. I think the offensive line, if they can get a serviceable center and an above average center, then we could be talking about the offensive line being a strength, especially if Titus Howard builds on what he did last year. Tunsil has a year like he did last year. Kenyon Green gets better, and Shaq Mason's able to do what he's done really since he got into the league, going back to Georgia Tech, and that's run block. So I agree. I think it was Steven. I agree with Steven that the offensive line and special teams. Cebu, you're on a go too. Special teams has been not decent. Special teams has been elite. Special teams with Frank Ross last year was top 5 in DVOA. I saw Rick Gosselin, who's one of the most respected NFL nerds that there is. Rick Gosselin actually had him as the number 1 special teams unit, and he uses all kinds of formulas and stuff like that. So special teams is elite. I'm just focusing on units here. As far as the weaknesses, the interior of the D-line, you could make a case, is pretty decent. You just added Rankins. You got Malik Collins. You got Ridgeway. It could be decent. Not elite, but decent. The edge, very meh. We don't know what to expect from Jonathan Grenard. Jerry Hughes was up and down last year. Father Time's creeping on him. So you're weak on the edges. You're really weak at linebacker. Right now, you're in the middle of a visit with Denzel Pierman, who is a good player, but how much better is he going to make you? I think he's going to be better than Christian Kirksey. But your linebacking core right now is a problem. The edge is a problem. Feed Me Hamburgers. It's a good name. Says the tight end position is weak. It is, but I think you can fix that relatively easy. the tight end position. I think Quintariano is going to be good, and I think Beck's going to be a nice, useful thing. And your wide receiving group is really, really weak because I don't even look at it as Brandon Cooks is still there. I think Brandon Cooks is on his way out. So your wide receiving core and your running backs are really weak too. You have one in Dameon Pierce, but you need multiple running backs. You need a few running backs. And quarterback, we know where that is, but I think it's an easy fix. So if you ask me the strength is the secondary, maybe the O-line if you get a center, and then there are some things you can do. As far as the most difficult fix, though, like what can't Nick Caserio fix? Because there's going to be some guys cut. There's going to be a draft. It's going to be pretty difficult. As far as like just being impossible, it's going to be really hard to imagine that this is an elite wide receiving core. That's you can make do with the Woodses, the Noah Browns, maybe a rookie, and maybe you can try to find ways to get creative and mask that. But I think fixing the wide receiver position, just like the secondary was kind of a 2-year thing, I think that's kind of going to be a thing for the Texans too. It's kind of going to be a 2-year thing. That's kind of a hard fix. You can draft one tight end and all of a sudden have a far above average tight end. If you get one of the top 5 tight ends in this draft and Tegan Quintariano improves and builds on what he did last year, and you have Beck playing in 12 and 21 personnel, one back, two tight, two backs, one tight. I think you can. I think you can fix the tight end group. You can fix the offensive line with the center. The linebacking core. I think that's going to be as much about D'Amico Ryans coaching them up, and I think that could be the trenches as a whole. D'Amico Ryans coaching guys up. You're not going to have elite edge guys in a matter of one off season. Maybe you get someone in the first round. Maybe Tyree Wilson. You trade up from 12 and get Tyree Wilson. Maybe Tyree Wilson falls in your lap. I doubt it, especially with what's going on with Carter. But you can maybe fix those things. But as far as like the impossible fix with the draft picks, and really nothing's impossible. I think the wide receiver core right now is the most difficult thing to immediately fix. Brown Chubby Bear. Kicked off a Texans Reddit, crazy SOB, always talking on Twitter, says, we were a top 10 passing defense last year. The problem is no one noticed because our rush defense was so bad. I think that's a misleading comment. I mean, if you just look at the stats and you say, they allowed this many yards as a passing defense, then you could convince yourself that. I do think the secondary was better, but I think teams just ran the ball so easy on the Texans that they didn't really try to challenge them as much in the pass game. I think it's kind of misleading. I think they could get to that point. And once they start stopping the run better, then I think we'll have a better measurement. But like when you say it's a top 10 passing defense, I kind of look at it like, if you're talking about a running back and say a running back isn't top 10 in the league in rushing, but he's one of the top 10 leading top 10 running backs in the NFL. I don't think they were a top. I think those two things are kind of connected to where I think they actually kind of were able to mask some stuff. And quite frankly, I think if you look at the way that I judge the secondary is, and maybe this is unfair, maybe it's not. When Kansas City really needed to drive the ball down the field, and or it was Dallas. I'll go Dallas, not Kansas City. Kansas City was running like a mofo. When Dallas needed a 95-yard drive in a couple of minutes, they had no problem lighting up the Texans secondary. I do think scheme makes them better, but I mean, we talked about the play call on 4th and 1 and Pep Hamilton and stuff, but when Dallas just needed to, when it was do or die, they were able to just slice things up. You look at the very first play, wide open in the middle of the field. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could tell yourself they had a top 10 pass defense. I just don't. I don't look at it the same way as you. I do think it can happen though. We'll get someone's asking about Zeke Elliott. We'll get into the running back options in a second. We'll get into some of the other names. I see there's like a Jadeveon Clowney thing. We'll talk about Brandon Cooks. and all of the some of the other comments that we have. Are they going to cut Brevin Jordan? I don't know if they're going to cut him, but it's going to be an uphill battle for him to make the squad. We'll see how he looks when he comes through. This is going to be a make or break time for Brevin Jordan. This is kind of a crossroads period of his football career. Right now, we see fifth round picks get cut in a couple of years. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. You guys are throwing out some crazy names. And we'll get to them. Vincent Herrera says numbers don't lie. They do, though. I don't know what you're like. Numbers do lie, especially in football, especially in sports. Numbers do lie, and you can't say like when you say best. If you I just don't. I do think there's a gray area when it comes to numbers. I think numbers can lie. If a team's able to run the ball on you nonstop and they decide not to pass, like if Malik Willis is going to have, how many ever yards, and he's not going to have to throw a pass in the second half. I mean, are you going to leave that game and say we had a good pass defense? Are you going to say that they could and they didn't have to pass on you? I mean, I think that's how you would look at it. So numbers do lie, in my opinion. What do I think about Pyramid? I think he's better than Christian Kirksey, and I think they need some nasty at linebacker. They haven't signed a linebacker yet, so I think that he's a clear upgrade over Christian Kirksey. They've got to move on from having Christian Kirksey on the field as much. So I think he's a clear upgrade. I think he's got some good ball. I think maybe D'Amico can get the most of him. It's just a matter of health and how he fits. Is OJ Howard gone? Yes, he is gone. We will keep Cooks or trade him. Will we? He's gone. I would bet you any amount of money on that. That's not just like pulling something out of nowhere. Cooks, I think you can all but mark that he will be gone. Corey asking, why do the Texans keep letting Strubs get premium jersey numbers? Rogers changed his jersey number to 3 today. That's funny. I do think like when Lonnie Johnson used to wear number 1, I was like, it's Corey, tell me what your premium jersey numbers are. Because I do think that's funny. When Lonnie Johnson used to wear number 1, a big thing on our show was, man, Lonnie Johnson's not good enough to wear number 1. Like, if you're going to wear number 1, you got to be a badass to rock number 1, especially in the NFL. You got the visor and stuff. Yeah, that's funny. Talking about the number 3 there. Nathan says, I'm still irritated that you never asked Nick if the D'Amico hiring was because of the Silicon Valley reference. I'll ask him. I'll mess with him on it. I haven't really gotten to talk to Nick. If you noticed, Payne and Pendergast are going to have him on Monday on the Odyssey app and Sports Radio 610. I got to talk to Nick for like probably 5 to 10 minutes before the press conference. And I was just basically talking to him about, because I'd actually kind of lit him up a little bit. I just talked to him about the process. He asked me about Texas, UT. I mean, this wasn't like any like off record intense stuff. We just talked about what's going on in Austin at Texas. I asked him about players playing in bowl games because I think I said that Roshan Johnson, I thought that he probably could have played and maybe helped the stock a little. Nick actually said that he didn't think that it was that big of a deal. And we just BS a little bit talking about that. But I didn't get to ask him about the Silicon Valley reference. I might ask Sean and Seth to plant that one there. Tyler talking about a run-in with Caserio. Yeah, I don't want to run in on their interview. I might just have like a little thing there. They're working on the Odyssey app for sure. People talking about the Odyssey app, they're working on it. It'll be there. We appreciate you riding with us through that. But yeah, just keep going with it. The Odyssey app, AUDA see why. Quincy talking about the receivers. Having a badass receiver is what my Texan fanhood could always rely on. The good old days pass so fast. That is funny because you went from Dre, who was one of the three best receivers in the league, and then you had Nuke, who I thought was the best receiver in the league for a couple year stretch with the Texans. There's a possibility, like if we look back, because I was talking about the DeAndre Hopkins trade and like if you just look at 2020, the draft, let's say they would have got that number 8 pick from Arizona, and let's say they said they would have gone with a receiver. They probably would have been looking at Judy, Ruggs, Jalen Rager, Jefferson, Ayuk, and then there was one more receiver. Um, if you lucked into Jefferson like Minnesota did, then you already have an elite receiver. That could very well happen in this draft because that's kind of like the range where these guys were going. I think it was like 10 to 20, 24, 25. Nobody thought they were getting a number one receiver, and Jefferson just ended up being that dude. So you could end up maybe finding a receiver. I think next year is going to be the year where they find that guy. I think Addison could end up being a really good player. I think Smith and Jigba is going to be a really good player. Not as high on Quentin Johnston. And then there's some second round guys that could figure stuff out. But as far as like the torch being passed and the you know, going from Andre to Nuke, et cetera, I don't think that's gonna happen. Um, Panthers, we're not trading. I guess we have a Panthers fan in there. Shout out to the Panthers, Creekside ENT. They got that number 1 pick. They got the Lion season going now. Um, and I think they're taking CJ Stroud. I think there's a lot of lying going on. Schefter said today that Bryce Young was the favorite, but he kind of mentioned it like Mac Jones was. Um, so we'll see what happens. Anybody who's been in the show knows that I'm a Bryce guy. But Carolina, they definitely have the draft by the balls. And it must be good because they've been through some rough times there. Getting to the comments, Stephen Harris, and always comment, subscribe, like, all that. Always appreciate people for riding through. Tomorrow, I'm going to rank the top 10 moves and that have been made right now by Caserio. Stephen Harris says the Texans need, I'm assuming this means pass rushers and D linemen who can get to the QB. Everybody does. But yes, they do. Siraj Patel, hey Landry, do you think Cal New knows about the meeting Jack had with y'all? I know he does. They listen all the time. I've talked to them before, but yeah, they know everything I say. Some more than others, but yeah, they know everything I say. And props to them because I kick them in the nuts pretty hard. And they know what the deal is. So yeah, he knows about that. I don't think he was originally going to. But yeah. Nathan says he's in San Antonio. He listens to this. The Odyssey app. Well, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Spread the word. If you know any Texans fans, you won't find a better source. It's the show of record. We get the players, we get the coaches. We figure all the problems out of the Texans just for you. Odyssey app. And right here. Tommy, here we go. I knew this was coming. What's up, Tommy? What's up with the Texans pursuing Zeke Elliott? I wouldn't waste the cap space on him. I wouldn't either. Zeke at this point, there's really not a lot of explosion. He's a awesome blocker. That's the one thing about Zeke Elliott, and that's why he's going to find a role. They're talking about Tampa Bay right now. The one thing that Zeke Elliott is awesome at is pass protection. And the Cowboys, even when they were going through their like O-line struggles, you remember when the Cowboys had like the best offensive line in the league for like a few years? That wasn't really the case for a little bit of a stretch there. And the one thing that Zeke Elliott does at a really good level is pass blocking. Um, Problem is there's not really much explosion. And if what you have Damian Pierce right now, who's going to be your short yardage guy, it's just hard to imagine how Zeke Elliott fits in. And there might be a place where there's more opportunity for him. Um, so, if the Texans were, let's say they need Pierce got hurt or something and they needed someone and Zeke Elliott was still on the market, maybe that would happen. But I don't think he's a good fit here. C. Royal, would Clowney for a year be an option? I love JD. I was all about franchise tagging JD. I think if they would have franchise tagged JD in 2018, I think maybe they have a chance to go to the AFC title game. Um, However, uh, at this point, no. JD is just hopping around from team to team. He's just going 1-year contract, 1-year contract, 1-year contract. Quite frankly, he kind of quit on the Browns last year. So as much as I love him, I would not be in on Jadeveon Clowney. Um, that's just me though. Darius asks, if you were Nick, would you sign Fletcher Cox? Fletcher Cox just signed a 1-year deal with the Eagles. So no, and they also just signed Rankins, and they got some bodies on the D line. Probably want to get a little bit older or younger, I should say. So although Fletch and D'Amico have a good relationship, no, you can't sign Fletch. He just signed a kind of a hometown-ish discount with Philadelphia too. I think it was a 1-year, $10 million deal. Shout out to Fletch, one of my really, really, really good friends from back in the day. We used to run around hustling. NBA style. He always knew somebody, but he runs the promotions company for like street car races. He used to take me to those, man. There were some times there, just money going around like crazy, smoke in the air, all that. Shout out to Jacob Harper, uh, my boy and Fletcher Cox's guy. He was at the Pro Bowl with him a couple years ago. He goes up to Philadelphia all the time. Shout out to Harp. But nah, Fletch is staying in Philadelphia, and you can't really blame him. Steven asks, what's the holdup with moving Cooks? I mean, the market's gotta play out. There it might be a post-draft trade, it might be a pre-draft trade, but the market's really kinda gotta play out, and they gotta fill their roster and figure it out. But I think it will get done. Um, it's just a matter of what they get when it happens. But right now, the market's just kinda shaping up, and we'll have a better idea, you know, how much money teams have, how they're going to work with it, uh, how much they're willing to spend, all that. What is it called? Analytic, whatever the hell Caserio calls it. Uh, it will happen. George says, I like the new fullback we picked up. He's a good lead blocker. You're talking about Andrew Beck. He is a good lead blocker. He can block from the tight end position too. He's actually kind of a deceptively decent receiver. He's not a great receiver, but he's a he's a sneaky good receiver. And the other thing about him that I think is kind of weird, and this goes back to when he was at Texas, and at Texas it was a little bit too effing much, but they trust him to do a lot of crap. Like every coach that he plays for trusts him to do a lot of crap, almost at like a frustrating level to where like at UT, they were using him all over the place. Like it was kind of frustrating. Like Tom Herman was obsessed with him. Um, but he comes across as a guy who knows what he's doing. And for whatever reason, maybe he practices really good. He does some good stuff in games too. He does a lot of stuff that doesn't show up in the stat sheet. He gets the job done. And you also got to follow the money. Follow the money. That's one of the number one rules in life. That's one of the number one rules in journalism. You can find out the why when you follow the money. And when you give a guy that's a fullback / tight end $4 million, it's obvious they think something about him. So Andrew Beck is going to be interesting, but you can tell coaches like him because remember last year when the Texans played the Broncos and Nathaniel Hackett's goofy self ran a sweep with him on 3rd and 1? Remember that? It was the fullback the fullback toss or whatever on 3rd and 1, Andrew Beck just got swallowed up because you don't want to run toss plays with him. Like, coaches trust, like, all coaches seem to trust Andrew Beck. Um, I think that he's going to be a really, really uh, good piece for this team, and they obviously see something in him. So I'm with you. I like what he brings. I do wonder uh, what that means for the fullback position. Are they going to keep 2? Is he going to be the fullback they keep? A lot of times you're going to see him lining up when it looks like there's 2 tight ends, when it looks like they're in 12 personnel, and then all of a sudden he gives in motion and it's basically 21 personnel because he's going to be lead blocking. So he's going to be all over the place. Feed Me Hamburger says the Texans should pursue Sue. My question would be, why? I don't know how he fits. So we'll see what goes down. This is going to be a really, really fun time. We got some college basketball going on right now. It's an awesome time to be a sports fan. And it's an awesome time. Kareem Hunt, another name that's mentioned. I do wonder, like, what's going to happen with Kareem. It seems like Kareem wants to start. So it would be hard for me to imagine that Kareem Hunt comes here with Dameon Pierce already here. Now, the question is, like, does the league speak to you? Like, does the league look at Kareem Hunt as a starter? Could there be a situation where we get closer to camp and Kareem Hunt's still not signed, and all of a sudden the Texans are in on Kareem Hunt? I don't know. They definitely need to do something at running back. They need a couple of running backs, quite honest, and quit neglecting the position. I'm going to go watch the end of this college basketball. I'm probably going to be staying up till probably midnight-ish, doing some work and stuff. Actually drinking coffee right now, couple espressos. I'm on the fasting. So I've been drinking coffee between my 5-hour fasting. I know that might be too much information for all you, but I like to give you a little something about my life, as boring as it effing is, with the fiance, the kid, the dog kid, puppy, the little grumpy puppy. But yeah, I appreciate you guys. What do you think? You got any takes? You got any takes? Hmm? She's pissed. She wants to go back to bed. But all right, well, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Probably do a little bit of a live videos coming on throughout. Subscribe, like, all that. We're riding along together. Going to be fun. By the way, if anyone's going to the draft party, let me know. I'm going to be out there. I want to meet some of the listeners. I see most of you out at the tailgate and stuff, but the draft party is going to be a real exciting time. Real unique experience. The way that they've done it, they'll release the details. But if you're going to be out there, let's get it. Let's figure it out. Let's break some bread together. Appreciate everyone for coming through. No matter what happens, could be another signing coming very soon. As soon as maybe tomorrow at about 5-ish. Just guessing. 5-ish, 4-ish, 3-ish, maybe. Could be a signing coming. Be on the lookout. Got you covered. Talk to you at 10 tomorrow. Enjoy the college basketball. Enjoy the Texans offseason. 6 weeks away, by the way, from the NFL draft. No matter what happens, amidst the most exciting offseason in Texans history, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we are all in this together. Have a good one.